I remember being in bed and her waking me up and saying, "This guy's not breathing." And I went out there and pulled him out of his seat, tried to do like chest compressions. We're on the phone with 911. And he ended up dying in the, while I'm pressing, on his chest. They took him out in a body bag. I can remember sitting outside, when they were taking him out in a black body bag, and just remember because they were in there forever, and I was like, man, they need to hurry up. I mean, I was starting to get sick. As soon as they loaded him in there, we went right back to the place where he bought the dope. Got some more dope.
All right. Well, Christopher, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
It is my pleasure. We was talking a minute ago. I was telling you about Parrish, which was on recently. Actually, one of his videos got like a million views. On TikToks. Yeah. One of his crazy stories, right? About staying up for like 7 days or something on meth.
Yeah.
And it got like a bazillion comments and everything on there. Some people identifying, some people talking trash.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I've been up for 7 days before myself.
Oh, really? Really? Yeah. But you came highly recommended by him. He personally hit me up. He was like, "You got to have this guy on. I really, really like his stories." So thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. So you want to hop right in, man? Tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I will. Well, I always like to kind of start off and talk about the things that kind of preceded before, because I definitely displayed a lot of alcoholic and addict behaviors before. I really kind of started my substance use. Grew up in an alcoholic addict family. Long line of alcoholics. My mother's side was Irish. Father's side, my biological father, Polish. So I was a dumb drunk, in the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
hey, look.
yeah. So, kind of being brought up with that. My grandfather, my mom's dad, passed away with like 42 years of sobriety.
Wow.
But a raging alcoholic, fighter pilot, in World War II. Got sober in 1969. My mother, and my grandmother, both manic depressive, so a lot of mental health issues in my family. My grandmother was manic depressive, schizophrenic. My mother, manic depressive, sometimes would go into 2 years of not getting out of bed, manic depressive, not really raising the kids, accompanied with a lot of alcoholism and substance use. My father and my mother split up when I was 2 years old. My mother remarried. So that is who I consider my father. His name's Chuck. He is 27 years sober. He got sober on my 18th birthday. Wow. So he adopted me when my mom got pregnant with my little sister. Had my last name changed. That way I didn't feel any different from the family. But he was an alcoholic, as well as my mother. My dad, who raised me, was ex-Navy. So he got out of the Navy, continued to work for, Lockheed and Martin. So he continued to work at the naval bases. So I was born in Charleston, South Carolina. And all of my father's naval friends became shrimpers. So they kind of just hung around my house all the time. There's always, a couple shrimpers sleeping out in the living room on the couch. And they are heavy drinkers and, substance users. So
now, this is your father's.
My father's who raised me. Yeah, my biological father kind of out of the picture at 2 years old. So I didn't really have a relationship with him, Do you have a relationship today? No, yeah, I spoke with him a little bit. He came back in and made an amends to me when I was still using substances. He passed away a couple years ago, a little while back from what's the disease where you start forgetting everything?
Dementia.
Yeah, dementia. It's like the one that's a lot stronger than that. Not dementia, but
Parkinson's.
Maybe, yeah.
It's more of a
one of those, yeah. But actually, it hit him really hard. He passed away. He came and made kind of amends to me. But I didn't know who he was. You know what I mean? It was, 30 years, and I don't fault any of that. I never really had a whole lot of, I don't know if that contributed to my, substance use. You know what I mean? They split up. He got another family, had other kids, kind of moved on. I think I went back in his life for a couple months when I was starting getting in trouble pretty early. But they quickly sent me back to my mom's house because I had issues really, really young.
Yeah. The amends that he made, was that like an amends like we talk about in these 12-step programs?
No, it was more just kind of coming in and just, basically I'd been up all night really when I met up with him. Was in a toxic relationship. He met me. I'd stayed up all night, borrowed a friend's car, met him out at Jack's Beach. We went and had a beer together, and we walked down the boardwalk, and he basically said, I love you, and, I hope you do well. And, kind of, I guess it was more for his probably just to kind of, clear that up. I mean, I was his biological son, so, kind of clear that up. He left me like $8,000 when he passed away. His wife then kind of did that, and I still talk to her. So, I never had any, I don't know if I had any deep rooted, I spent a lot of time spinning my wheels on trying to figure out why I am the way I am, what contributed to my drug use, and why I ended up becoming an alcoholic and a drug addict. But really, man, I feel like a lot of that time was wasted trying to figure out why I was the way I was. There's always a lot of, psychoanalysis and people, well, this is why you are, deep-seated trauma. And I get all that. I work in the recovery business. But I feel like once I just accept that I am the way I am, and I can't use substances in any form safely, then I can make some progress. If I'm constantly trying to figure out why the way I am, I'm not really making any progress towards getting better. And I spent my wheels for a long time trying to figure out why, and it doesn't really matter why. I just am. So my dad, Chuck, the guy that raised me, adopted me, he's my dad. So I'll just from now on, just that's my dad. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I consider. So he was alcoholic, but provided for the family. However, my mother, didn't work a whole bunch because of her mental illness and stuff like that. So dad kind of provided. I didn't think there was anything the way I was raised. It was bikers and shrimpers is basically who I was raised by. So I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, a little town called Folly Beach, till I was about 9 years old. There was a lot of parties every weekend, oyster roast, keg parties, drug use. The occasional stabbing would happen at the house with the bikers and jumping people, and I'd go patch up the bikers and kind of send them on their way. And, it was, I didn't see anything wrong with it because that's just what I was raised in, So, had my first, but let me kind of go back a little bit. So I started, having a lot of anger problems at a young age. I feel like, I don't know if the depression, the manic depressive and stuff kind of skipped me. But mine came more out in rage, anger, punching holes in sheetrock, sticking my head through the wall, getting in fights pretty early on, which I realize now is all fear-based. You know what I mean? I was always scared about, how people were going to perceive me, how people were, I can't let this person talk to me this way. I have to, do whatever and fight or do whatever I did. I had super low self-esteem. A little chubby kid, we didn't have much money, wasn't a lot of food in the house, even though my dad was working and bringing home money, they were always drinking and using substances. Mom would go out and, kind of, spend all of dad's money and all our money. And so we were left with, powdered milk, cornflakes, and beans and rice. That's what I grew up on. But, we had a house to live in, power was usually on. Life wasn't that bad. So I had my first drink at 9 years old. I took a 6-pack of Coors, snuck up on the roof, drank a couple of them, immediately started throwing up. I probably my first 2 years of drinking, I drank till I threw up or blacked out, right off the bat. So first time drinking, started throwing up, went to climb off of the roof, fell through the overhang in the porch, got stuck there, cut the back of my leg, throwing up on myself, and I couldn't get out. So that's how my parents found me, with 3 beers in my hand, 2 or 3 beers in my hand, throwing up, bleeding out of my leg, stuck in the roof. So great experience, first time drinking. So that's how they, my first experience with alcohol. Shortly after that, me and my dad switched from the naval base in Charleston, South Carolina to St. Mary's, Georgia. And we moved over there. That is when we moved in we took off in a Winnebago, drove to St. Mary's, lived in a KOA for a couple months, me and my dad, then my mom and my cousin. And
what's the KOA?
It's like a campground, campground little thing where you park Winnebagos. So, yeah. I went there and, and started, we just lived there for a couple months until they found a house over in Fernandina Beach. So it was a great place to grow up, man. Even with the alcohol, substances, all that stuff, that was the only life I knew. So I didn't see anything wrong with it. Mm-hmm. So we moved in there, right on A1A. My bus stop was at a beach access right across the street. We were literally right across the street from the beach. So still not a bad place to grow up. Yeah. There's a lot of money and, wealthy people over in Amelia Island, Fernandina Beach, where everyone lived. But, we lived in a simple little, 3-bedroom little apartment on the beach. And, lot of partying going on there, and I can tell you, right from when I got there, man, like I said, super low self-esteem. I always was wearing, my parents always had, not a lot of money, so never had any new clothes. I was always wearing a bar shirt, sliders, or a hammerhead shirt that was way too big for me. I had to wear that to school, and but I can tell you one thing, man, is I wasn't spoiled, so I had to learn how to take care of myself pretty quickly. Learn how to cook for myself, learn how to wash my own clothes, learn how to, clean my room, do all those things, because they definitely weren't doing it for me, know. But really quickly, man, I started getting in trouble. Even when I was in Charleston, man, I was already started to see psychiatrists, therapists, because they just didn't know what was wrong with me.
So they would take you.
Yeah.
You think maybe that was because of the family history experience? Only reason I say that, I have a lot of similar behaviors as a child, but it seemed like nobody I knew even ever mentioned any type of psychotherapy or anything like that as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they did. I mean, there was behaviors. I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, I was at one of my parents' parties, and one of their dogs came up and I think nipped my hand. I chased the dog down, held the dog down, and bit the dog, and came walking back up with blood running down my face, and the dog running around yelping. And that was my first. My parents were like, "Okay, you might need to go to therapy." All of my mom's friends are freaking out and looking at me. I'm like, "A dog bit me. What do you want me to do?" You know what I mean? So right then they were like, "You might need some help."
Yeah. An eye for an eye.
Yeah, man.
Even with
that's the way I
looked dogs.
I was 8 years old. You know what I mean? But I had some. So, and I'll probably do this a lot. Sometimes I go back, and there were some issues I had when I was still in Charleston, some kind of near-death experiences. I had got spinal meningitis when I was a kid, almost died from it, and had I know we were talking earlier about, you're a kid, I had 105. I think I had 106 temperature. Mm-hmm. And they had to do, it took me immediately to the hospital. I had to do a spinal tap, and put a, draw fluid out of my spine, and I got very close to kind of, I almost lost me. I was very, very sick, got out of that. And then when I was also, my mother thinks this contributes to it, but I was hit by a car going 40 miles an hour on my bicycle and got knocked 60 something feet. Way up in the air, hit my head, didn't break any bones, do any of that. My mother says that when after the head injury, I may have received a head injury, that's when my behavioral problems started. So I don't know if that added to it.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
They talk about it there's a lot of famous people, most people know famous people that have had severe traumatic. I think Roseanne was one of the people I heard, and she gets these crazy, but it definitely causes like impulsive behaviors. It's like a thing well known now because like CTE with the NFL and everything. So it definitely does cause some of those.
Yeah. My mother swears by that. My mother was a nurse, and so, she had some medical training and kind of looked at it, of course, her own experiences with mental health and stuff like that. She was very smart, very, very smart lady. And I think even before that, I was diagnosed like extreme ADHD, super hyper. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't concentrate in class. I couldn't focus on one thing at a time. I was always all over the place, super active, you know what I mean? But they put me on Ritalin as a young kid. My mom said it made me like a zombie. She was like, this is my kid. I basically sat down and read 2 books, and she was like, where's my kid at? Freaking out, you know what I mean? But in hindsight, maybe I should have stayed on it. She took me off of it. I've always wondered. My mom was very quickly to take me to hospitals and take me to doctor's appointments if I had any issues. And I kind of look back on that, and I wonder if it was for she just wanted my medicine, you know what I mean? I don't know if they continue to get the Ritalin and they continue to take it, like my mom and her friends or whatever. But I've always wondered that, if that was a thing. But so I like I said, with the extreme ADHD, they took me off the medication and just kind of let me run with it. And so that definitely caused a lot of problems in school, focusing and doing, and concentrating on classwork, doing all of that stuff. I didn't know how to channel my anger. So I just would, I'd always be gone. That was back when kids played outside and we did all those things and, making ramps and skateboarding and, doing whatever we do, man. So hung out on the beach a lot. There was a beach bar over there in Folly Beach where I grew up, and they'd drink with all the bikers and the shrimpers, and they would let me loose, and I would go out, swim in the ocean by myself, do all those things. I was basically, a little feral kid, on my own, basically. So, but it was cool, man. I like the way I grew up. I mean? I wouldn't change it for a thing. It made me who I am today. So so we moved over to Fernandina Beach, man. My aunt and my first cousin moved in right next door to us. She had everyone kind of compared me to her. She drank and used like I did. She woke up in the morning, she started drinking, intravenous drug user. She ended up actually passing from extended like hepatitis C that was never treated.
Your aunt.
Yeah,
Your
my
mom's
aunt.
sister?
My mom's sister, yeah. Their name was Fran. They called her Fran the Man. She was like a 300-pound. I also had like obesity in my family, and she was like a bigger lady, but she would fight grown men. She was in juvenile facilities at a young age. And I loved her though, man. She was awesome. You know what I mean? And she didn't take any shit off anybody. You know what I mean? So, and my first cousin, her daughter Rochelle, she lived with her, and she definitely went through a lot of trauma and stuff like that. With men in and out of her aunt's life, and definitely got mistreated a lot. And so she. So we moved into Fernandina Beach. They tried to get me into sports, football, stuff like that, because I was super active. I just wasn't very good at team sports, super low self-esteem. So I found surfing is my outlet, man. I started going, I grew up in the water, in the salt water my whole life. So I found surfing. I love that. That was my outlet, is where I can kind of get away, man. And,
excellent exercise too.
Yeah. Well, man, I mean, they in hindsight, it probably wasn't the best. They put my bus stop at a beach access, so literally, like me and all my buddies would meet in the morning and go to one bus stop, and we'd look over the dunes. There'd be waves. We'd take off. Now not going to school much, So I started getting in trouble really early at 6th grade. I had stole a half ounce of weed from one of my friends, one of my dad's friends. Got caught at school with it. I was already I think they already had me like in the front of the class because I was always getting in trouble. So the teacher had me sitting there and kind of found out I had some pot on me. They ended up catching me. I was arrested in 6th grade. Took out in handcuffs right when all the classes were like being switched, so everyone saw it. and I kind of started looking at that as like that was like my thing. I was the bad kid, you know what I mean, and I thrived on that. This is just who I'm gonna be. So I was arrested in 6th grade, and then I started getting arrested a lot more. Very young. So I was I kept getting in on probation. I'd get in trouble, and then I remember going to court day with my dad one day, and the judge said detained until next court date. And I remember looking at my dad, and I said, "What does detained mean?" I had no idea. He said, "Well, you're gonna find out." So they handcuffed me to 2 other gentlemen and took me to Duval Detention Center. Scared to death. Scared to death, man. I went in there. I got beat up pretty bad a couple of times. I was good at like punching walls and stuff like that, but I was scared to fight anybody else, man, because I didn't have any, I had no self-esteem. So I went in there, got beat up for a long time, for long periods. When I went in there, I didn't fight back. And then they ended up, I went to DDC a couple more times, started fighting. Then I go into court again for continuing to get in trouble. And it was just dumb stuff, trespassing, destruction of property, just all kind of stuff like that. And I'm using substances a little bit more now. I'm literally huffing butane, huffing gas, any kind of inhalants that I could get my hands on. I'm stealing Xanax from my parents. I'm stealing roaches out of the ashtray. I'm starting to drink a lot more because they never really paid attention to what I was doing. I could get away with whatever I wanted to. I could stay gone for days at 13, 14 years old, and my parents didn't know. Stealing the car, doing all those things. So the judge sentenced me to Marietta's boys' prison at a young age. And that's where they, I don't know if you heard the stories about that later on. They found all kind of unmarked graves. There's a lot of sexual abuse. They ended up killing kids out there.
Wow.
So really bad place. So my mom fought for me not to go in there. And she got me placed in a place called Eckerd Boys Camp, which is out in Ocala. And it's a long period, long-term, behavioral modification for young kids, for young boys. So I get put out there.
What part of Ocala?
It's in the Ocala National Forest. It's kind of by the Sheriff Boys Ranch and stuff like that. So it's actually, they're still there, but
it's not in Withlacoochee.
No. It's in Ocala. It might be. I don't really know, man. I was like 13 years old.
I went to one out there. Okay. It was in Withlacoochee, Florida.
Yeah, it could have been, man. I don't know. I can tell you, on my way to the place, I literally ate mushrooms and drank a whole bottle of Robitussin on my way to the place. That's another thing we do all the time. We started, going to the stores and stealing bottles of Robo-tripping.
Yeah, Robo-tripping.
I mean, whatever I could get. It's hard to get your hands on real substances when you're a kid. So, but I did have the luxury of having my parents as alcoholics and addicts, man. And so we started stealing drugs from them pretty early on. So, I got placed in this boys camp, and I can tell you, man, I went in there and I did well, except for the fighting. I kind of went in there and I realized, I had a hard right hook and started fighting a lot in there. But that was one thing they didn't really, it was one of those places that they let you out when they think you're ready to go. So most people stay there for about 2.5 years. I stayed there for a year. And I can tell you, every 6 weeks you go home for a home trip, and you would go home. On my first one, I got there. I stayed for about 2.5 weeks, got settled in. You basically live there. You cut down trees all day. You build your whole campsite out of trees. The only thing they come in and build like a wood deck floor for you. You build a chuck tent, you build a latrine tent, you build your housing. You literally cut down trees with big old saws, and you skin them with a wood skinner. You use a hand drill. I learned a lot of cool stuff there, man. Is a lot. Yeah, but I mean, we worked our ass off. You know what I mean? And you're in the mosquitoes in the hot Ocala National Forest, man. And it was definitely trying, but man, I settled in. I've always been good at that. I've done a lot of jail sentences. I've done a lot of time. And once you get caught, you go into it. I've accepted it. You accept it. Okay, I got to do this. So I did really good with. They had what they called chiefs there, and they're basically like your counselors, that deal with us. And they would always pick me to talk to the other kids. I don't know why. I just did really good with I was smart enough to know that my behavior dictated when I got out of there. And some people weren't able to do that, but I can tell you it was a high-level juvenile program. So most of the kids that were there, I found out later that the program in that life was better than their home life. They got food, they got fed, they got all these things. And, so they, a lot of the kids that were there, it was like their fifth or sixth program. There was, 16, 17-year-old kids in there that were big as adults. You know what I mean? And I had to fight those guys on a daily basis. And so that's what we did. So I realized pretty quickly that, how I acted dictated how I'd get out of there as quickly as I could. So I got out of there in a year. I did pretty well in there. And I can tell you, so going back, I was there for about 2.5 weeks, hit right on when I was supposed to go home for 4 days. So I went home to my first thing, and it was very bad at the house. That was when like the early 90s crack had just hit really, really big over there, and all my dad's shrimper buddies ended up pulling up hash. They found a spot, coordinates out in the water, where they started pulling up blocks of big hash. So they started trading it for crack. So crack came into my household, into my parents' household. Pretty prevalent, pretty strong. And so that's when things got real bad. I remember I came home one day. It was right at the end of my home visit, and it was about 4 hours before I left. A crack dealer came over and started asking my mom where his money was, and got very violent with my mother. So I hit him with a crutch over the top of his head, and this guy was he used to be a football player for University of Miami, and big guy. So he grabbed me, slammed me, beat me up pretty bad. My friend came over and saw that. My friend Miles came in and tried to fight him, and he ended up beating us up pretty bad. I ended up bleeding all out of the back of my head. I had like long hair. I was a little surfer kid. Got taken back to the camp, and I remember them asking me like, "How was your first home visit? How's things going at home?" And I'm bleeding out of the head. I got a black eye, and I said, "I don't want to go home anymore." You know what I mean? I don't want to go home, so I skipped the next couple of home visits. So I went through that. They came and visited me while I was at camp. They came to my graduation. My dad, my sister, and my sister was like around 3 or 4 at the time. And then and then I ended up getting out of there. I even on the home visits I did come in that year, I never got high, never smoked any weed. I did what I was supposed to do. I'd come home, surf, and then I'd go back to the camp. And like I said, man, I did pretty well over there. So I learned a lot. You know what I mean? And it probably helped me from going to prison and doing things. There were some things to help me with, man. So I came home, the things continued doing. My drug use started to escalate. I started using cocaine about 15 years old. Started eating a lot of Xanax.
Before you go into that, I want to ask you this because I didn't do a year. I did like 6 months in a program. And comparatively to my home environment, I remember missing the kind of structure and attention that I got in that facility.
I did. Yeah, for sure, man. Because I didn't know what I wanted. We're kids, you know. Well, you don't know what normal life was. I mean, I'd go to my normal friends, my normal friends' parents' house, and they would sit down and eat at a table, and I'll have family dinner. And I can remember, saying, wow, this is weird. It's weird, but I also kind of wanted that. And I craved a normal home life, but, because it was embarrassing, man. All my friends wanted to hang out at my house, of course, because we could get away with everyone. So all of my friends, you little drug addicts, all come to my house, and my mom would, have them on the dance floor, dancing with them, playing loud music, couldn't get off the floor. And she was a bigger woman, and I would be embarrassed, and I would be embarrassed. And I'd always say, I wish I had a normal home life. I wish I had food in the house. I wish I didn't have to go upstairs and steal from the neighbor for lunch money, but it was, I don't know, man, looking back on it, they did the best they could. They were alcoholics and addicts, man. I don't hold them at fault for anything nowadays. Because, if I'm constantly blaming someone else and living in that life of this is the way I am and it's your fault, I don't think I would have ever got sober.
Yeah, well, once you learn that you have the disease of addiction or alcoholism or whatever you call it, you realize that, oh, they had the same thing that I have.
Yeah.
So it's more an empathetic feeling as opposed to like, why did you do this to me?
Yeah. They're sick people, man, just like I was, and I can remember my parents' friends, coming in and speaking to me, reeking of rum and liquor and saying, don't ever turn out like me, kid, stay in school. And I remember just thinking, I'm never going to turn out like you. You're a loser.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm never going to end up like you. You know what I mean? But my main goal in life was to make sure I got high every day from a very young age. That was my main goal. Other people are already, in high school and picking out where they're going to go to college and what is this going to be my field. And my main goal was to make sure I was high every day. That was it from a really young age, man. So, when I got out of the camp, I continued to use my drug use started to escalate. And moving forward, man. And then when I came back, I skipped 7th grade. I went in at 6th grade. I skipped 7th grade, came back in 8th grade, and I got super in shape while I was in this place. So I used that. I came back and I remember being picked on when I was in school. So I wanted to fight all those kids. And that's what I did. And I fought a lot. Probably at least twice a week. I'd get in them all just brawl at school, and then I found out that if I did that, I didn't have to skip school anymore because they would just suspend me. They would suspend me for 10 days. I could surf, I could hang out. I didn't have to go to school because I didn't want to be there. In 8th grade, they placed me in a class, and it's like the perfect class for like a young alcoholic or addict. They placed me in a class called emotionally handicapped. So they basically just put us in a trailer in the back of the school, and they let us play a lot of kickball. They didn't let us eat lunch with the other kids, and it was just a whole trailer full of just bad kids, you know what I mean? And, confused, bad, whatever you want to say, man. So emotionally handicapped. I always laugh at that now. And I'm like, that's just like the perfect description of a young alcoholic, you know what I mean? Or addict, you know what I mean? Like emotionally handicapped, because that's what we are. Really, man. I don't know how to deal with emotions, so I mask it with substances.
Yeah, well, he wasn't taught that.
Yeah. So they put me in there, and that just made me just go deeper into like not wanting to go because I was embarrassed. Everyone thought we were like SLD, thought we were slow
Box
learners.
Classes.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm just a bad kid. It's emotionally handicapped. And they're like, yeah, right. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, you're
You're getting away with that in school.
Yeah. So, and I, like I said, so I get placed in this class and I'm like, all right, no, I really don't want to go to school. You know what I mean? So I don't do that. I dropped out in 9th grade. I made it to high school. Went over there. They tried to place me in the same class, and I was like, I'm not doing this. You know what I mean? I think I was held back 1 year. So the time I got over there, I just kind of, made it through 9th grade, and then, ended up dropping out, running from the truant officer or whatever for a while. And then, at 16, I was able to start going to GD classes. Went in there, and it was all the kids I grew up with. They were like, a lot of the kids from emotionally handicapped class, and GD class. So started doing that, and continued to start to get in trouble again. Moving on like 18, man, a lot of acid, a lot of mushrooms, a lot of, I can tell you my first mushroom trip. So the benefits of having an alcoholic addict mom family. I went and got a bunch of mushrooms. We went over to Dunn Avenue over here in Jacksonville, picked some mushrooms. Ended up boiling. I remember counting them to this day. I boiled 140 mushrooms down, made this tea, and then everyone else drank like a half a coffee cup. And I drank a 32-ounce flash flood cup. Blacked out for a couple hours. Came to, couldn't see, hallucinating very badly. We get in the car because we were skipping school, and they said, we got to go. My mom's coming home. And I was like, and I got in the car, and I couldn't talk. And I remember them asking me, like, are you okay, Chris? And I was like, I don't know. I thought I was going to die. You know what I mean? It was very intense trip. So I had them take me home. I went in and asked my mom, I walked in and she was like this big. And I remember just hallucinating. Everything was very far off, everything melting. Never really saw anything that wasn't there, but definitely a lot of, how mushrooms are. So I went in and asked her to, come back in the back room and talk to me. And I told her what had happened. I said, I think I ate some bad mushrooms, and she said, well, we need to take you to the hospital to get your stomach pumped. And I was like, no, I'm not going to the hospital. She was like, well, tell me what you did. And I told her how many I took, and she was like, okay. So she knew what to do. So she made me start laughing at some point. She went out. She made my dad and my sister leave, and she put on Fantasia for me, sat me in front of the TV, and I just sat there and tripped on my mom for like 8 hours, and it was great. I just sat there, and she kind of made the scene right for me, made me comfortable, and I just tripped with my mom for like a long time, and then I came out of it, and that really kind of made me. My first experience with hallucinogenics made me, I guess, moving on. I knew everything was going to be all right. I was never one of those person that had a bad trip, freaked out. So I was always kind of the leader, and we're going to do this, and started doing a bunch of that stuff. So, so moving forward, man, I think it's around 17 years old. I'd come and go as I pleased, did whatever I wanted to, and I came into the house one day, and instead of smelling, cigarettes and liquor and then loud music playing, my mom was sitting around a table with 3 other women, and they had a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous sitting in the middle of them, and it smelled like coffee. My mom called the AA hotline, and 3 ladies came over and 12-step my mom. Did a 12-step call on her.
Still didn't smell like cigarettes.
Actually it did. No, it did smell like cigarettes. It was cigarettes and coffee instead of rum and coffee. So, so actually it was cigarettes and coffee. They had a big book sitting in the middle of them, and I was like, what is going on here? You know what I mean? What is happening? I didn't know anything about any of that stuff, and so my mom ended up getting sober.
Wow.
And that's what I always wanted, right? You know what I mean? I wanted this normal life, you know what I mean? But it sucked. You know what I mean? They got sober, and now they're paying attention to what I'm doing. Where have you been for days? What's going on? We need to take you to therapy. You need to do this. My dad.
I have such a, that's, I share that when I share my story is like, my father ultimately died from, he drank himself to death, but there was periods of time where he had gotten sober. Mm-hmm. And it was like, it sucked.
Yeah.
Because he was like, you got to go to school today. You got to do this. I was like, this is bullshit.
Yeah. Just go back to drinking. You're better when you're drinking. And being embarrassed and wanting all those things and thinking I wanted this normal home life when they somewhat normal, they get sober. Not what I wanted. My dad followed about a year later. My dad actually got sober. His sobriety date is my birthday. So he got sober on my 18th birthday.
So your mom basically carried the message to your dad?
Yeah, he continued to drink for actually I think my dad just went dry for like a year and just was miserable. You know what I mean? And just, dry drunk, you know what I mean? And wasn't going to AA and still drinking, still sneaking and drinking and stuff like that. And then he got sober on November 26th on my 18th birthday. So he got sober. Mom got sober. When they got sober, they realized that they didn't really like each other. So, that's how a lot of people, they're drinking and then they get sober. So they ended up getting, they split up for a while. I went back and forth. I moved out at when my parents got sober. You know what I mean? So I was like, all right, it's time for me to leave. So I moved out at like 17. I worked in restaurants, way to the front of the house. All my friends were in the back of the house. It really catered to my drug use and drinking because I could drink on the job. You know what I mean? I'd wait tables. I started out real young working in like fine dining restaurants, which was really cool because I made good money. You know what I mean? I could support my habit. But I'll say back then it was still somewhat manageable. You know what I mean? When I look at that, I was still like, I was paying rent, for a while, you know what I mean? And I would drink, you know what I mean? I'd stay up late. I didn't have to go to work the next day until like 4:00 so I could sleep in, maybe get up, surf, go back to work and then continue going on again. All my friends worked in the back of the house, chefs. So I would, start drinking on the job pretty early. Already have a buzz when I get off. Start doing cocaine. Cocaine became a big part of my life back then. Didn't really like opiates. They made me sick. I was just a hard drinker. I don't know if I was yet alcoholic. I don't know. There, it talks about it where we can maybe at some point I could have put it down, you know what I mean? But then I ended up going way past that. And I think at some point we all cross this invisible line in the sand where it no longer becomes a choice. So started getting locked up again, you know, started going into the county jails at 18, started racking up a lot of battery charges. I got sober. I had 8 battery charges, 2 aggravated assaults, and a battery on a law enforcement officer. Ooh. So lots of fighting, man. You know, some people call it short man's disease. I don't know. You know what I mean? That's kind of what it was. I was a drinker, and that's what I was good at. So that's what everybody knew me as. You know, I'm crazy. I was crazy Chris. You know what I mean? And basically, you know what I mean? People started not to want me at the parties. People started not wanting me around because they knew that probably some stuff was going to get destroyed and things were going to happen. So I started getting arrested again. You know, going into adult jail. My parents are sober now. And I asked my dad that, you know what I mean, later on. I said, I feel like they may have enabled me for a little bit longer than they should have, you know, because they're working a 12-step program. I feel like they should have kind of known, you know, let me kind of do what I had to do and hit my bottom. But my dad told me later on, he said, you know, I felt like I wasn't there for you when you were a kid. So I felt like I needed to be there for you, or when your addiction, when you got older. So that's what they did. They got me lawyers, you know, they helped me out. They spent thousands of dollars on lawyers for me, you know, when I had some serious charges, you know, the battery on a law enforcement officer. And then that
is no joke. They don't play about that.
They don't like that, especially when you live in a small town. I grew up, you know, Amelia Island, Fernandina Beach is like a 14-mile long island. So when I get those charges, basically everywhere I go, you know, they would find something for me. And I'm not saying the cops had it out for me. I definitely
gave them the opportunities.
Yeah, I gave them all the opportunities. I always had drugs on me. I always had that. So every time they searched me, you know, I mean, I wasn't the smartest criminal. Yeah. So you know, I mean, I was always the one that would go to jail. And that continued on, and of course, you know what I mean, through all that, like I say, I moved out at 17, but I had to continue to move back home because I wouldn't pay the rent. I'd get evicted, or, you know, things would get bad. I'd get arrested again. I'd lose my job, and I'd have to move back in home. So they started to like tell me, hey, you might need to go to AA. You might need to go to NA. You might need to go somewhere and seek some help. You know, if you want our help, we want you to go to meetings. You know, we're going to pay for this attorney. You can live with us, but we want you to go to meetings. So I'd go into meetings in Fernandina Beach, and it was like where AA goes to retire. You know?
Yeah.
So,
what age was this?
I got exposed to AA at probably my mid-20s. Okay. You know what I mean? So started going into meetings, and it was like guys that, you know, they were, you know, 50s, 60s, you know, 8 years old, 20 years of sobriety, you know, and they were all talking about pissing themselves and this and that. And I remember just sitting in those meetings and going, I do not need this. You know, I'm smoking weed in the parking lot as I go into these meetings. But like, you know, I was on probation probably from the time I was, you know, 14 to, you know, 38, you know what I mean? I got sober at 39. So, I mean, I was just always in some kind of connected with either juvenile law or, you know, adult law. I was always somehow, you know, in the system, you know what I mean? So jail stints started to get longer and longer. Never went to prison. I probably have done, you know, 7 years total county time. You know what I mean? Just
the
always
roughest
going in.
Time.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And like, I don't know how I didn't ever go to prison, man. It was always like, you know, towards the end, man, they were like, your point system is too high. You're going to go, you know what I mean? And, I don't know. I would just wait it out, man. I would get that. My parents would give me an attorney, and they'd end up giving me 6 months, you know what I mean? Or 9 months, or I'd get a year in jail, you know what I mean? And I'd sit in the county jail, and, you know, and every time, man, I'd get out. But I had there were brief moments of sobriety, you know, through that time, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, you know what I mean? And, you know, I would go right back to what I was doing. And then, you know, moving forward. So in early 2000, I met a girl from Georgia. She was an ex-heroin addict. She was a drinker at that point. And then I remember her, she got back on opiates, and I remember her, you know, going to give me a Loratab or a Percocet or something, and I was like, I don't really like these. They make me sick. They interfere with my drinking, you know, and I took a half one. I threw up. I was at her parents' house in Douglas, Georgia. I threw up, and I was like, I don't like that. And she was like, well, just keep eating them. Just keep eating them, and you'll get over the sickness, and you'll like them. And I was like, thanks. So that's what I did. You know what I mean? I started eating them. Next thing you know, my opiate habit kicked up. That was in like early 2000. Continued to drink, do all those things, got in a fight, blew out my knee. And that, in early 2000s, if you have an MRI with an injury, is like a golden ticket.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I went into, we started going to pain clinics. By that time, like I always want to get that, I make it sound like, well, I got a knee injury and that's what got me hooked on opiates. I had already started an opiate addiction before that. And that just added to it. It just gave me, free will to get whatever I wanted. Started going into pain clinics. She also had like a messed up back from like a cheerleading industry and a cheerleading injury. And so we started going, she was going to about 6 doctors a month. I was going to about 5 or 6 doctors a month. OxyContin came in. We started using a lot of OxyContin. At that time, I was just snorting them. It got to where I had about a 80 milligram OxyContin habit a day.
Jesus Christ.
And I remember I couldn't make it through a full night of sleep, without detoxing, because it just got so bad. I would have to have a line, next to my bed. And I can remember like waking up sweating, reaching over, snorting a line just to be able to go back to sleep. Sometimes I'd throw up on myself. It was a very bad, that OxyContin use, man. I watched that show, was it Dope Sick or whatever on there? And like I watched that, and that is my life, man, in the early 2000s. You know what I mean? Just a sickness all the time, and waiting in doctor's office and like, hanging over the pharmacy counter, and the pharmacist being like, dude, go read a magazine, bro. Like, you know what I mean? I could hear when my pills would hit the little pill counter. I could tell the sound of my OxyContin hitting the pill counter. I'd be like, that's me. You know what I mean? I would go up there, I'd get my pills. I always had like drug dealers that would meet me in the parking lot, and pay for half my script and basically sponsor you. There was a lot of people who sponsor your, they'd pay for you to go to the doctor. You give them half your pills. And I'd get a half, a half a bottle of 80s for free, and I'd sell some, I'd eat some. And, you think you got 2 people living in a house going to a total of 12 doctors a month, and that is a lot of pills, man. Still was not enough. Always detoxing, always going through it, man. When I had them, they were good. You know what I mean? When it wasn't, it wasn't. I mean, just, and, all the terrible stories that go along with that, man. And so started, had my first check-in. We moved from Fernandina over to Jacksonville. Had my first check-in at a Gateway Detox. Went into there, got out. I actually called the NA hotline. A guy picked me up. God, I can't remember his name.
What year was this?
Had to be some like around 2004 or 2005.
Okay.
It was a black guy with dreads. He still goes to NA. I still see him. He works Herman. That's who picked me up.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Herman picked me up.
Yep.
Came over to Mandarin.
It's my sponsee brother.
Wow, man. Yeah, Herman. I saw him at the Jacksonville at the Jaguar Stadium not too long ago. He picked me up, brought me to a meeting. And I remember coming back. I was like, I think I did like a 7 or 8 day detox in Gateway. Came out and Herman picked me up, went to a meeting. I came back and she had left like a half of 40 sitting on the coffee table. And I was like, I was sitting there just like, I didn't want to use it. I didn't have any defense though, man. Picked it up, used it, continued to go on to where I was going, man. Ending up leaving her on Christmas Day. She went to Georgia to visit her family. I can remember I was already dope sick again. Had my friend come pick me up and move over to my mom's house in Fernandina. She kind of gave me some Loratabs. My mom claimed 22 years of sobriety. However, she had some medical problems. She had some things going. She took Loratabs and that kind of moved on. She didn't have a drink, because she considered herself an alcoholic. But she definitely started dabbling in pain pills and stuff, and always took Xanax and stuff like that. So she kind of helped me out get through that. And then I remember I moved back over there, and I hooked up with some old friends. They were all started doing methamphetamines, so I started doing methamphetamines with them. Very strong back then. Started doing meth. Started living with a friend of mine. We continued to So I got off the opiates on methamphetamines. That was a story for a while, man. Because if I could do meth, it would kind of get me through the withdrawals of the opiates. And so I was like, okay, this is what I can do. So got on meth for a summer. Ended up going back into gateway detox. Got placed in a place called Step Up. Step Up was like a holding place until they could get you into residential. And I can remember going over there, and I was sober for about 30 days at that point, man. And I remember going over there, and I remember them telling me that I could go on a pass if I wanted to. I made up some story and said that some other guy had said that he needed to go pick up a check, and they said, yeah, you just put in a pass. We'll give you a bus pass for 4 hours. I left, went and met a chick, did whatever, and then called another buddy of mine. He was just leaving the doctor, and I was like, dude, come get me. So he came and picked me up. We continued to went on another run.
And then do you remember that time? I remember like when I got introduced into recovery, and the first time I was in the moment of making a decision. Do you remember it being like that? I was like downtown at the Landing, and I was, clean and sober. And I was headed back to the homeless shelter I was living at the time. And I remember like the thought of using popped in my head. There was like a big $5 margarita signs. I wasn't really a drinker, you know what I mean? And I seen that sign and I got stuck. And I was like, I need to make a decision. Yeah. It was like, I got to make it. And then I made that decision. So you remember it being like that kind of?
Oh yeah, man. I remember going in. This is before I realized that I can't use substances in any form. You know what I mean? It's all I know. How am I supposed to, and that's why like, it's so hard, you know what I mean? For people getting sober early on, if they don't correctly get into a program of action, you know what I mean? Like I wish, I work in recovery now and I hear story after story of people telling me like, if I can't use anymore, I have kids, you know what I mean? My kids need me. I need all these things. I want to stay sober more than anything in the world. It's my number one priority. And I just always tell them, I wish that was enough. I wish that was enough, man. Because, I'll tell you about that in my last 10 years of using, man. Like, it's just not enough. I got to put some action behind it. I wish just wanting, to get sober was enough. You know what I mean? Because, at that point, I wasn't really wanting to get sober. You know what I mean? I was tired of being sick all the time. Yeah. I was tired of withdrawing, but I didn't really want to get sober yet.
Yeah. Like I don't want to use, I don't want to go back to this life. But I really want to get high. Yeah. Like that was like the decision moment.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't know how to stay sober. I wanted to stay. I wanted to quit getting sick. I wanted to quit going to jail, detoxing in jail, sitting on a floor in a fetal position, throwing up, doing all that stuff, man. I mean, if you're an opiate addict, man, it's a constant thing. You know what I mean? I don't care what you say. You know what I mean? You can have the best drug dealer in the world. You can have all that stuff, but at some point you're going to run out of money. They're going to run out of substances. You're going to be sick. There's no doubt about it, man. And a lot of that stuff was mental. I found out, I mean, it is physical, but I don't know if you ever noticed when you're sick, and you're just waiting on the dope man to call you. As soon as he calls you and says, all right, meet me here, I immediately feel better. You know what I mean? So my brain will tell me that I'm sicker than I am. You know what I mean? And going into that kind of stuff, man, and detoxing in jail. See, when I'm detoxing in jail, it's a lot smoother. I don't know, man. I detox quicker. The only reason is because I know I can't have any. I know I'm not going to get it. Once I finally settled in and realized, don't get me wrong, it was bad. But just the simple fact that I know the dope man can come meet me at jail, I was like, okay, let me get through this. You know what I mean? Stay up for a couple of days, not do all that. It was bad, but it was worse when I detoxed out of jail. You know what I mean? When I tried to do it on my own or anything like that, it was hell, man. I'm going through that stuff. So moving out of there, man, I kind of, opiates, it went from opiates. Then I started using crack. Then I started doing, I remember the first time I was with a friend of mine. I was drinking in the back seat. It was a buddy of mine that I grew up with in Fernandina. We go over to pick up this girl that had just had an overdose at Shands Hospital. He's got like a 1/4 ounce of cocaine, and they get in the car and they bust out some needles. And I can remember asking them, like, what does that do to you? And I remember them just, you don't want to try this, like the Dewey Cox story or whatever. Get out of here. You don't want any of this. You know what I mean? And like, I remember kind of like sticking my arm up in the front of the seat and just saying, let me try that. You know what I mean? They shot me up with some cocaine. And I remember that was it, man. I was like, all right, this is it. Do it again. Yeah. Went through that 1/4 ounce of cocaine the first day, man. My arms are all, bruised up and stuff like that, and trying to figure out how to shoot up myself. And
were you one of those people that would never, there was always things that I wouldn't do? Somebody talked about setting the goalposts. Like my father died from drinking, so I was like, I'll never drink. And then that was like one of the first things I did. And there was always things that I
was the opposite. I couldn't wait to do the next thing at a young age, man. I remember my friends, I always hung out with some like older guys, you know what I mean? A couple years older than me. And I remember they did cocaine for the first time without me. And I was like, so mad. I was like, dude, I want to do cocaine. Yeah. You know what I mean? I want to try this. Man, my goal in life was to get high.
I can't wait to smoke some crack.
Yeah, I mean, it was like that was crack was taboo. If you're a crackhead, it's bad back then.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So I remember saying like, I don't want to be a crackhead, and I had a buddy of mine named Ryan that started smoking crack like before, like we were just like early young, and he was smoking crack already, man. And we were like, dude, what are you doing?
What a loser.
Yeah. I do remember that. Like crack was no, I would never do that. You know what I mean? But like, started, of course, all those things, man. You just, when I start drinking, I lose all inhibition. I do whatever you got on the table, man. And mine was like, I was trying to find the perfect buzz, man. My early on, man, my go-to was, I used to eat Rufinols. I loved Rufinols. Everyone calls it a date rape drug. It made me, it was like Xanax times 10. You know what I mean? I literally could blank out and not have to
think.
I wouldn't have to when I do stupid shit, and everybody, because that was always every day when I woke up. Everybody was like, Jesus Christ, man, what did you do last night, Chris? You beat up your friend, you did that. You stole my buddy's watch. You did all that. I was a thief too. And that came on from early on use of having to like steal food and stuff like that. I got a buzz off of stealing, man. I was a klepto, man. I stole a lot of stuff. And I got high off of that. So like I would steal like from my friends, and they'd be like, Chris, man, what do you do? I'd wake up the next morning and be like, dude, you got my watch? You know what I mean? I'd be like, shit, dude, I forgot. I didn't even mean to do that. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. I don't even remember it. So when I took Rufinols, it would allow me to behave in these ways that I wouldn't have to take, I wouldn't have to pay. I would just always blame it on the drugs. You know what I mean? Man, I was on roofies, dude. What do you expect? You know what I mean? So I would do methamphetamines and Rufinols, and I would eat them, and that was like the perfect buzz for me. I was kind of up, you know what I mean, where I could stay up, but it wouldn't knock me out. But I'd do methamphetamines and that, and then I'd, drink along with all that. A lot of people kind of X out drinking when they get on opiates. Not me. I drank whiskey and I did OxyContins. You know what I mean? I did all that stuff. Their drinking was always a big part of it. So and then we go, into that whole OxyContin, and all that stuff goes into that, man. And so when they shut down the pill mills, they did all that. And I remember calling that at an early age, right when they did it. And I was like, what do you think's going to happen now?
Yeah, it's too good to be true. It ain't going to last forever.
Yeah, well, I remember just saying heroin is about to hit down here pretty hard. You know what I mean? And that's what happened, and I can remember, that it happening just that way, man. So right around the time, so I started going into, my story was detox, then a halfway house. Okay. So this is when I started actually attempting to get sober. I started going to NA meetings. I started going to AA meetings. I'm trying to find something because at this point, now I want to get sober. I'm tired
of this. And is that gateway detox?
Oh yeah. I went into gateway detox probably 12 times.
Wow.
Before I
probably worked there one of those times.
Probably.
I used to work there in 2010.
Okay. Yeah, I was probably in and out of there, man. And I'd go in there, I'd get a girlfriend, you know what I mean? I'd meet there, I'd leave with a detox chick, man, or whatever. And I can remember, that's just how alcoholics and addicts are the funniest people, man. I can remember back when they used to put us in orange suits, right? And I don't know why this is always funny to me, but like they had me in an orange suit, like a jail suit in detox. And I can remember I'd lost a bunch of weight from like using methamphetamines, and like I can remember being outside. That's when you could smoke cigarettes there. And I remember popping my collar on my orange jumper being outside at Gateway Detox, and I just remember sitting up against a table. I had like a wife beater on. I was like, I'm the coolest guy in Detox, man. You know what I mean? I just remember thinking that, like, the quickest thing an alcoholic and an addict family.
What a brag.
Yeah, what we get back, you know what I mean, is our opinions. We think that, you know, we just think, it's just crazy how I look back on that stuff and go, man, I was so delusional. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's what it talks about. I mean, we drink and use ourselves into a state of delusion. Yeah. You know what I mean? I had no idea, dude.
In the literature that I read, it talks about egomaniacs with inferiority complexes.
Yeah, that's what it was, man. Yeah. I felt like shit about myself, man. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But still, no goals. No goals in life, you know what I mean? I could always fall back on waiting tables. I was really good at that. You know, and I could get a job pretty quickly. They wouldn't run a background check on me, so that was always my go-to, man. So I'd go into detox. I'd get detox, and I'd go into sober living. I'd live in Alco house. I'd live in alumni house. I'd live in tradition house. You know what I mean? I'd go in, and the thing that I would do is I would get sober. I'd take the substances out, you know, for 30, 60 days max, and I wouldn't change any of my behaviors. You know, my justification, I'd sleep with the girls in the halfway house. I'd always go to like a co-ed, you know, halfway house, and I'd go in there and I'd continue to behave the way I did when I used substances. And I would justify it by saying, well, at least I'm not getting high or drunk. I got to have some kind of vice. You know what I mean? And mine was women. You know what I mean? That's what I would do. So I would start doing that in those places, man. And then, of course, I wouldn't last long, man, because I wouldn't change anything that was going on inside, man. I would just behave the exact way I do. I'd pick on other people. I would think because I'm funny that it was okay to make fun of other people at my own expense to make myself feel better, you know, and I would just continue to be an asshole, basically. And so that's what I would do. And then I wouldn't last that long, man. And I can remember I moved into one place. It's a guy named Alfred, actually. He was an NA guy, and he owned some kind of he called it a sober living, but it was over in Springfield. And it was basically, he put a bunch of addicts in the house. It was like, you know, drug addict real world. There was no structure either. They just moved us in there. Yeah. They just moved us in there and let us do whatever we wanted to. You know what I mean? And so I actually stayed sober for a little while and ended up meeting a girl from New Jersey that just got out of Lakeview. And she was a heroin addict. I moved in there, and I ended up going to jail again. I got arrested down there in Springfield. And then I remember getting out of jail, them picking me up, the girl from Jersey and this other guy that lived in the house. We moved in there. We moved into, their parents both had money, so they moved into a place in Ponte Vedra, like an apartment. They paid the rent for a year. And I moved in with them. And I was like, I started waiting tables. So I was like the guy that provided the drugs. I had the house to live in. We were just friends. Never really, I just kind of used her, to be honest with you, man. She was a person that I knew her parents had money. So I, you know, kind of got in a relationship with her. And, you know, nice person, man. I didn't know how to treat women. I used them. I usually sought out women that their parents had money, took care of them, and so I would mooch off of them, you know, and end up moving into their parents' house, and that was like my whole life, man. I was like you know, kind of how, you know, a lot of women that come in recovery, you know, have those issues. I had the same issues, man, where I looked what I could get out of someone. I was very selfish. So, you know, if I was going to see a girl, she had to have something that would benefit myself, you know, and so that's what I would do. So I ended up, she was from New Jersey, South Jersey. Her parents lived about 45 minutes out of Camden, and about 40 minutes outside of Kensington. So I ended up moving to New Jersey with her. And then I started doing opiates again, started doing that stuff over in when we were still living in Jacksonville. Ended up moving up there with her because whatever circumstances happened, we had to move back in with her family. So I move up there, and that's when, you know, all those years and before then, like in and out of detox, in and out of halfway houses, I hook up with this chick. We go on like a 3-4 year relationship. We move up to Jersey, and hook up with all her old friends, man. And she starts taking me to Camden, New Jersey. And I grew up, in a small town, man. I remember going into Camden, New Jersey for the first time, and it is a whole different scene. You know what I mean? The heroin and the, everything up there, man. But it's a free for all. You know what I mean? And I was home when I got there, man. I can remember the first time pulling in down there and like slumping down in my seat going, what the hell is this? It looked like a war zone, man. You got rooftop watches. You got guys, hey, take this left. And you like give your money to one guy. Then you go get your heroin from like a 9-year-old kid with a pistol. You know what I mean? I remember just being like, Jesus Christ, what's going on out here? But after about 2 weeks, man, I'm so comfortable. I'm walking the streets of Camden. I'm going down there. I'm shooting up in alleys. I'm doing all that stuff. But we always had our parents' house to kind of go back. You know what I mean? And it was, we had a place to live, man. And so we started stealing from our parents. We started doing all that. Had a guy die in our living room. This was after we lived there for about, 2 years. And man, things got bad. Things got real bad up there, man. I just continued to, started to get abscesses in my arm, started to shoot up on a regular basis. Just complete chaos, man. But we always had, our parents to fall back on. They were, they took care of her. So, had a car, had all that stuff, man, ended up passing out of the wheels, wrecking the car, doing all that kind of stuff, man. And then I started going to Kensington, and that's a whole nother world. Walking around with a gun in my pocket, walking the streets of Kensington, shooting up in alleys. We go down there, and then what happened is it was still a little small town in South Jersey. So one guy, I remember being in bed, and her waking me up and saying, this guy's not breathing. And I went out there and pulled him out of his seat, tried to do like chest compressions. We're on the phone with 911. And he ended up dying in the, while I'm pressing, on his chest. They took him out in a body bag. I can remember sitting outside, when they were taking him out in a black body bag. And just remember, just because they were in there forever. And I was like, man, they need to hurry up. I was starting to get sick. As soon as they loaded him in there, we went right back to the place where he bought the dope, got some more dope, and continued to get high. But after that, it was a small town, and there were stories of, we let him die, we didn't call the cops in time, and that's really not what happened. Like literally, he was, he literally was blue when I came out of the room, dragged him down, tried to do chest compressions, immediately called 911. He just passed away, man. And so overdose. Yeah. And we ended up finding out he was, I did look in like the chair that he was sitting in, and there was like 9 or 10 baggies that were stuffed down, empty baggies. So he just stayed up all night. He was going through some stuff, man. And so ended up using that, and he was eating Klonopin with it. So ended up dying right in front of me. So after that, we moved back to Jacksonville. And that's when, it started hitting down here pretty hard too, with heroin down here. So we started using down here, continued to do the same thing over and over. Again, her parents are footing the bill, paying for our rent. Started stealing a lot more, started getting on. She had got on Suboxone. I started to, get on Suboxone as well. Never really went to the doctor, never med managed or anything like that. But basically what I would do is I was still waiting tables, kind of half working, get fired from one place, go to the next place. And I can remember, I would eat like half a strip so I could just not be sick that morning until I could make enough money to where she can go score some dope while I was at work. And then, I'd shoot dope in the afternoon. And so I'm not really the whole MAT thing, and I'll just go ahead and kind of speak on it. I'm not really, for me, I'm not, it doesn't really stop me from using, you know what I mean? If anything, it's a buffer for me and continues to let me use, you know what I mean? Because I would sell the strip so I could get high more, and I would do more of that. And that's really what it gave me. And so I would literally eat a strip in the morning, and then I would shoot dope in the afternoon. You know what I mean? I wouldn't get as high, but I'd still get high if I used enough. So it didn't really work for me. So moving forward, man, I get arrested down here for a bar fight. I get put on probation, and then I violate probation. I piss dirty. They're like, okay, I piss dirty for cocaine and marijuana. And she said, my probation officer said, come back next month and we'll see what we're going to do with you. And I remember just saying, you're going to let me walk out of here? They let me walk out. So I ran to Jersey. We went back to Jersey, and my heroin use got real bad, real bad. Started stealing a lot, stealing from stores, stealing from her parents, stealing from neighbors, breaking in houses, doing all those things, man, to support my habit. And, I ended up like sleeping in the streets. Their parents had kicked me out, sleeping in the streets in Kensington. And then finally, I get arrested down there, and they find out I have a warrant in Florida. And I got taken back. I remember being arrested and being in Camden County in the jail in New Jersey. Not a good place to be. And I remember them saying, do you want to sign extradition papers? And I was so sick. And I just remember being like, yeah, Florida's never going to come get me from here. I'll sign extradition papers. They won't come get me. I'll get back out and start using. Well, that did not happen. They send these private extradition companies that anywhere, if you get arrested in Florida and you run, they're going to come get you. So they came and picked me up on about my 10th day. I'm still real sick. They handcuffed, shackle, and waist chained me, and I went for 6 days and nights. You don't get out to sleep. 6 days and nights, you're riding on a metal steel bench in the back of a van, handcuffed, shackled, and waist chained, and dope sick. So I went from New Jersey to Manhattan, and then what they do is their system keeps updating. One person drives, one person sleeps. They're like ex-military. They're USG7, this is what they're called, and they're fugitive recovery agents. So they took me I was the first pickup. I went from there to and they go around. They go and continuously pick up people that have warrants in Florida. So they took me to Manhattan. I went to Massachusetts, did another pickup, went to Ohio, went to Michigan, turned around, went back to Ohio. Meanwhile, we're driving in like blizzards and snowstorms, and you can't see out of it. You're in a black box. So at nighttime, you can't see your face. I mean, you can't see your hand like this far in front of your face. So you start mentally going crazy. And I started flipping out in the back of the van and choked a guy out with my chains. They tried to get me out in Atlanta and said, we're gonna drop you off at this jail. And I was like, fine, just let me out of this thing. You know what I mean? You can't. It's cruel and unusual punishment, man. You're literally peeing in cups and like pouring them down holes in the van. They have to find a jail for you to pee in, man. I hope they've already outlawed that, but because it cannot be legal how they do. You know what I mean? And so they take me all the way back, and I go into Nassau County, and I go in again for another jail stint. And I can tell you, man, by this point in my drug use, I know when you're going to jails and stuff, and you hear all the stories, and you're surrounded by negativity. I mean, basically everyone ends there. When I get out of here, man, I'm going straight to I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to get high. At this point, I know why I'm here. You know what I mean? I've had enough exposure to like the 12-step rooms and stuff like that to know there is a better life, but I just can't seem to grasp it, right? Because I'm tired of going in and picking up another white chip. I'm tired of going in and asking them, and then you got the guy that always, the guy with the old timer that asks you, what are you going to do different this time? And I just want to throat punch him. You know what I mean? I'm like, don't, because you're so beaten and broken, and you come in and you got this guy that, asking you, what are you going to do differently this time? And it just pisses you off even more, So at this point, I go into jail, and they're trying to give me a prison sentence. And, I remember just, and waiting it out and just saying, no, I'm not going to sign that. I'm not doing that. And they ended up giving me another year in county. And I go in, never been so happy to get to jail in my life. You know what I mean? I get there, and I can remember being in jail, doing a year. I grew up with all the COs, you know what I mean? So I knew them all. They all knew me. I always got the sweet trustee job. They had me washing cop cars, and then I remember as it was about a month before the end of my sentence, and they said, I about got into it with a guy, and they said, we're going to switch you jobs. We're going to switch your trustee job to evidence. And I remember going, okay. So it was the old jail in Nassau County, and they have all the evidence, and they're red taped and stuff like that. And I was in there painting and doing whatever. And I can remember them saying, I remember walking by one of the old holding cells that were usually shut, and I walked by one of the things. I had like 10 months of being sober. I wouldn't say sobriety. I was going to meetings in jail. My dad started sending me like daily reflections and readings while I was in jail. But at this point, this is where my dad. At this point in my addiction, man. Before that, I'd go and this is when my dad was kind of had to shut me off. You know what I mean? And he was just like, I can't really, basically what he'd tell me instead of giving me money, he just said, I'd pray for you. You know what I mean? Because he's like 20 years sober at that point. And, I just remember him telling me like, I hope it works out for you, son. You know what I mean? And having his head like down, he couldn't look me in the eye. I couldn't look him in the eye. And I'd call him begging for money one more time. And he just, at this point, he knew he had to quit enabling me and let me go. Let me figure it out. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm so glad he did that. You know what I mean? Because I ran out of options, man. I think that's the only reason I got sober.
Yeah.
So I come back and I'm in that jail for about 10 months. And I remember walking by one of the old holding cells and there was just a grocery bag tied up with a bunch of prescription bottles in it. And I was like, no red tape on it. And I was like, I know they didn't do that. It's a small town. And I walked through and find a bottle of Ativan, found a bottle of Flexeril, then I found 120 Lorcet. I can remember I was just like, okay, you know what I mean? No thought at all. I just went right to it, man. I started eating them. My last month in jail, I don't even remember, you know what I mean? And I got out, moved into a halfway house, tried to lie and say I had almost a year sober, broke down in a meeting and said I'm full of shit. You know what I mean? I used while I was in jail. Continued, lasted for 30 days in there. Continue on the same pattern. So, to kind of get towards the end of it, man, and where, the deep, like kind of dark places that it brought me, man. I started living in room for rent places over in Jacksonville. I tried one more attempt to get sober. The longest periods I had, my sobriety date now is September 7, 2016. My longest period of sobriety before that was 6 months. And I knew what my problem was the halfway house girls. That's why I kept going back out. I mean, that was my take on it. So I remember I moved into City House down in Springfield, and Angie, the lady owned it, was nice enough to take me in without any money, and I ended up paying her back, and I did well. I was going to a bunch of meetings. That's what I was doing. I'd go to 2 to 3 meetings a day, man. I asked somebody to sponsor me. I'd go as far as a fifth step. I'd get some of that weight off of myself. You know what I mean? I'd admit my faults, I'd do an inventory process, leave a lot of stuff out, and I'd start to feel a little bit better, and things would get better, man. When I quit using substances and quit drinking, my life gets better, meaning that I have more money. I'm able to function better. I thought I was enjoying life, but I would shortchange myself every time, man. I was like, all right, this is it, man. You know what I mean? This is as good as it's going to get. You know what I mean? I'll give me a room for rent place, or live in a halfway house, have a little bit of money, give me a nice bicycle, you know what I mean? And life would be okay with me. And I would say, this is enough. So I stay away from the girls for about 4 months, and I meet the girl of my dreams on the porch at City House. And we start a relationship. I move out with her. I got 6 months of sobriety. She relapses the first day we move in together. And I keep bringing her back in, and I wanted to say I was, I care about her, so I wanted to get in, but now I know it's for my own personal, reasons, you know what I mean, my own selfishness, so I would let her back in, and then right around that time, I started, she was a crack addict, I started smoking a lot of crack, and I'm using opiates. I relapsed. And then right about the first week of my relapse, like before that, my mom is still in the picture. She's still in and out. My mom just always wanted me to get sober. She's always rooting for me, always trying to help me get sober, man. Even though we've had run-ins, you know what I mean, in the opiate field. It was weird. It's kind of weird. My mom still claimed the sobriety, but she also still had this opiate stuff where she would like call my girlfriends and stuff like that, and they would tell me they would do like side deals because she would do whatever. And some of the times is because I'd steal her opiates, you know what I mean? So she would have to get extra, So she, but I was a mama's boy. I still love my mom to death, even though we kind of, argued a lot and did all that. Man, I love my mom. So she moved me, so I moved in with this girl. I started getting high again, and my mom calls me and says, I've been diagnosed with stage 5 lung cancer, and I'm going to really need you. I'm glad you're sober. I can remember I was literally up all night smoking crack, and I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I'm sober too, Mom. You know what I mean? Because at this point, man, after so many relapses, in and out, man, I can remember people calling me when they knew I was getting high, and they'd just be like, Chris, are you okay? Are you all right, man? And I would just be like, how dare you? How dare you accuse me of getting high? Because you don't really, because I was like, well, you haven't seen me physically getting high, so you don't really know. But I mean, everyone knows all the signs and what's going on, man. And I can remember just getting upset with everybody. At this point, I have got resentments against AA. I got resentments against NA because I will find loopholes in the book. I'm constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself. You know what I mean? All you guys are full of shit anyway. You know what I mean? And so I had just basically given up on 12-step stuff. You know what I mean? I was like, this is it, man. And this is just the way I'm going to be. And I'm going to figure it out. You know, I mean, this is what I'm going to do. And so what happens is my mom gets sick. She's like, I need you to take me to doctor's appointments and stuff like that. And I wasn't there, man. And that's always hurt me, man, because she had a pretty quick downslide. She gets diagnosed with cancer. She starts trying to do a little chemo, starts doing all that. She gets pneumonia, can't fight it off. And she immediately gets moved into hospice in Fernandina. And right around that time, so what happens, I was working at a restaurant in Springfield. You know, I was doing really good with the 6 months of sobriety I had, but then I started showing up to work high, you know, and then I get fired from my job. I get evicted from my apartment. My mom's moves into hospice. My girlfriend's off sleeping with my drug dealer probably. My world's crashing around me again. You know what I mean? And so she goes and I remember I don't have any place to live. So then when she gets moved into hospice, I move a cot next to her bed and I start trying to play the role of the good son. But in reality is the only reason I was there is because I had nowhere else to go. I'm meeting my drug dealers in the parking lot. I'm taking her car to go get high while she's in hospice. You know, and I remember I left. The weird thing about that, man, I would still go to meetings sometimes high. I can remember shooting up in the San Marco bathroom, man. I go to meeting. I left my mom because she was very, very, you know, I mean, she was basically sedated at this point. She would wake up, you know, acting like, you know, basically like she's drowning in her sleep with lung cancer, you know what I mean? And she would wake up scared to death, you know what I mean? They would come in, give her more morphine, and then she would pass back out. And so I left and went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in San Marco. I shot up in the bathroom, and then I went and sat through a meeting. When I came back, she had passed. So right then, you know, crossroads. What am I going to do? Am I going to try to get sober again? No, I don't think it's going to work for me. I just had basically told myself that I'm just one of those people that this is not going to work. You know what I mean? It's not going to work for me. So my mom left me a little car. I went to the funeral. I packed up the car and I basically hit 95 and I was like, where am I going to go? I had nowhere to go, you know, and I ended up going to Charleston with my first cousin, my aunt's daughter. Went there, burned that bridge, stole all of her, she took like Adderall and something else, took all of her pills. She said, if you don't have my pills when I get home, she was a nurse, you have my pills when you get home, you know, you need to be gone. So I was like, well, I can't reproduce those. So I left, came back. And then basically, so what I did then at that point, man, is I said, I'm going to go on a death run. Because I didn't want to be around anymore. You know, it hurt me really bad. My mom passed away because she was the one that was always still there for me, and I can remember just saying, I'm just gonna not wake up. And so I would use enough substances to not wake up. And people did not want me getting high in their house. I mean, the lowest of the low, you know what I mean, did not want me around anymore because they were like, we don't want you to OD in our house. You know what I mean? I would knock on the door and I'd hear them and they're walking around. They'd look out the window and see it was me and they're like, we're not letting that dude in. You know what I mean? And so in the shadiest of shady places, man, I was not welcome anywhere. So I basically just ended up, you know, isolating and just getting high and hoping I wouldn't wake up. Somehow, man, I kept waking up. And then I can tell you, man, like towards the end, I'll go to my last time use, man. I was in a hotel room in San Marco, and at this point, man, I had my regular was Baker acting myself. That's what I'd usually do. I'd go into Baptist Hospital and I'd say I want to kill myself. They'd put me up for 3 days, when I didn't have anywhere to go, because I wasn't really good at sleeping on sidewalks and stuff, man.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? That wasn't my speed. I'd always find a girl to shack up with, or a friend to sleep on the couch, or, whatever, man. There was some nights sleeping outside in the bushes, but most of the time I was pretty resilient, was able to find somewhere to stay. So, either detox or Baker Act ward. So I started going in those places, man, and towards the end, man, I was in a hotel room. I used about 3/4 of a gram of heroin, probably some fentanyl mixed in there too. That's right around 2016. That's when fentanyl started to come into play. Shooting methamphetamines at that point too. That was a whole another demon. It took me on a whole another path, weird path. Meth people are weird. No offense to anybody meth addicts, but shit gets real weird when you start doing a lot of meth and women and just weird stuff going on, man. And so I just that scene really wasn't for me, man. So I always go back to my go-to was opiates. So I use a lot of substances. I fell out for 6 hours. And I woke up in this hotel room just because the people were banging on the door telling me it was time to get out. And I was laying in a pile of puke. I was there long enough for it to dry on my face. And I can remember getting up off the carpet, and like hearing the, come off of the carpet. I still got a needle hanging out of my arm. It's all blown up in my arm. And I was just like, I keep waking up, man. That was the bad part about it. I just wanted to not wake up. And God just kept waking me up, man. And I can remember just walking out, and I sat on the curb in San Marco, and there was a city bus that kept going by, and I was like, is it going fast enough that I can just walk out in front of it? Because for some reason, these substances are not killing me. I just wanted to die. I was suicidal, but didn't want to slit my wrist or hang myself, so I just wanted to use substances, not wake up. Because I had no plan of, making it this long anyway. I thought I would die a long time ago. You know what I mean? And so... But really what it was, man, when I look back on that was God, man. All those jail sentences, everything I go in, that was right when I would get arrested is when things would start to get real bad. I would get arrested. I would do 6-9 months. And then I would do some push-ups, eat some honey buns. I'd get healthy again, and I'd go back on another run. But now looking back on that was God saving my life every time, man. He would scoop me up, lock me up. I didn't see that then. You know what I mean? But I definitely see it now that was why he was saving my life every time, man. And he wouldn't let me die. So I wake up on this floor, and I walk out, and I'm about to step in front of a bus. Instead, I started reaching out to people in the program. I started saying, man, I don't know, man. Should I give it one more shot? I don't think it's going to happen for me. I don't want to go back to AA or NA. I don't want to do this anymore, man. But I can't continue to go on because I can't seem to die, Yeah. And I walked homeless, down through downtown. I walked to the Alco house, to the old halfway house I used to live in. And I can remember sitting on a bench, crying my eyes out. And the lady that ran the place, named Angel, she came out and she was like, she gave me a cigarette and she was like, what are you going to do? And I said the 3 magic words, man, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And she called, when the guy ended up being my first sponsor, a guy named Kenyatta, showed up and...
young black guy?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Kenyatta basically shoved me in a car, took me to Baptist Hospital. He worked at Gateway. He worked in the UA lab.
Yeah, we worked together.
Yeah. So saved my life, man. Put me in the hospital and brought me to Baptist Hospital. And I remember them asking me, and I don't know why, they asked me, because they knew me. I was a regular. You know what I mean? They're like, you want to kill yourself, Chris? And I just said no. I said no. And that was definitely God working in my life, because usually I say yes and they put me up for 3 days. For some reason, I said no. And they said, okay, we're going to try to get you a cab voucher to Gateway. I was like, Gateway again? Yeah, it's probably my 12th, 14th time. I don't know. I lost count, man. Because every time I go into Gateway, I would ask for treatment. I would ask for residential treatment. There'd always be a bed. There's no bed full, or I'd fuck it up or do something, or I'd leave with a girl and never make it to that point, man. And so they take me there. I get to Gateway. I sleep in the waiting room at Baptist. I remember like in a sheet, sitting in those chairs out there, and I got my bracelet hanging out so they know I'm a patient, sleeping in the waiting room there. They give me a cab voucher the next morning. I show up to Gateway. I got the clothes on my back, man. I got a tank top. I got a pair of shorts and a pair of flip-flops and an empty book bag. And I get there and my arm's abscessed. I got a big old sore in there. It's pussing. I'm walking around the parking lots, picking up cigarette butts. I got 3 warrants out for my arrest at this point. I got 2 warrants in New Jersey. Because when I got extradited, I still had charges up there. They didn't let me deal with the charges, which was weird. They extradited me first. So I had charges up in Jersey. I had a warrant in St. Augustine. And that's how I, came in on a winning streak, man. Like most of us, and I remember finding like a half a Newport in the parking lot and like patching it together and smoking. And it was like a good day. You know what I mean? I was like, this is it, man. I got a half a Newport that I got to hold together. And then they ringing the bell one more time at detox, and I go in, and then at that point everyone talks about bottoms and a sufficient bottom to hit, man, but I can tell you, man, my bottom is that it didn't work anymore. The heroin didn't work anymore. The alcohol didn't work anymore. It wouldn't take the pain away, not even for a minute. You know what I mean? I would shoot up, start to nod out, and still be miserable, and that's my bottom. You know what I mean? My bottom is the substances no longer took the pain away, man. And it was the death of my mom, I had other stuff that I didn't go into, sexual trauma, molested as a kid, all that stuff. I don't know if that contributed. It doesn't really matter to me. So I go in, and I can remember I was in room 8 in Gateway. They got the blue mats, and I just remember praying this long, heartfelt prayer, and it was, fucking kill me or help me. You know what I mean? I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in anything. All I believed in, because God wasn't getting me high. You know what I mean? And that was where I'd always shut down when I'd go in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or NA when they'd bring up God, I'd just be like, I get that you guys think that, but I've just shut down. For some reason, I would get this thing. Not that I had any, I wasn't raised like that, and it just wasn't my thing. So the whole God thing did not work for me, but I had ran out of options, man. So it was 2 hours of me praying on my knees, crying. I can remember my whole forearms being just soaked in tears, going, God, kill me or help me, because I can't do this anymore. Over and over. It was kill me or help me, over and over and over. And then my prayers started to get answered, man, from that point on, man. I don't know what it was. There was one thing after. There was a girl in there that she basically said, I got some money, and she had gotten a car wreck, and she had like $10,000 in the bank, and she asked me, knew where to get high. And I was like 4 days in, dope sick. Real, that's like the bad days. And they offered me everything in there. They gave me 3 options. They offered me Suboxone, they offered me Vivitrol, or they offered me 45 days in treatment. And for some reason, I just said, I can still smoke crack and do meth on Suboxone, right? And they said, yeah. I said, okay, well, that's not going to do me any good. Vivitrol, it's got alcohol and an opiate blocker. Well, I can still smoke crack and shoot meth on that, right? And they're like, yeah. I was like, well, it's not going to help me, because it doesn't matter what it is, man. I want it. You know what I mean? If you get me on this to keep me off of this, and I'm just going to, my brain immediately goes to, well, this is what can get me high. You know what I mean? So it doesn't work for me, man. I need a spiritual solution, not a pharmaceutical one. So I go in, and they accept me in, and they tell me that we're going to get you in a residential. So I go over there, man. I don't speak to anybody for 2 weeks. I asked Kenyatta next door, I said, will you sponsor me? And he comes over there, and he starts taking time out of every day after work. He'd come over there, and we'd sit with the book, and we'd go through it, and I'd put an action behind it, man. And for some reason,
he has such a bright personality,
dude. Yeah, man. He was so happy all the time, and I was not. I was just like, why are you so fucking happy all the time, man? And I just remember him coming over there, but he gave me hope. He gave me hope, man. And I remember him sitting across from me, and he said, what? I can remember asking him, like, what am I missing, man? I move into these halfway houses. I go to a bunch of meetings. He's like, that doesn't work, man. You got to get in the program of action. So I go in, man, and he sits down, and he takes a time out, and he goes through a process with me, and he helps me have a spiritual awakening, man. And I go in, and I used it like my life depended on it, man. I don't know what happened. It was an act of providence, is what it says, man. Something happened. My ears opened up. You go from meetings from 7 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. And in between those breaks, I'm in the book. I'm doing work. I'm putting action behind it, man. And things started to get better. I started just little things, man. I started picking up trash on the ground. I don't know why that was always special to me, but I never walk by trash and go, that's not mine. I pick it up. I still do it to this day, man.
Yeah.
I walk by, I pick up something. It's just a good deed. You know what I mean? And something about that just helped me starting to think less about myself. It's weird. You know what I mean? But I would do that stuff, man. And sorry. Yeah. And then I would start, I just started helping others while I was in treatment. I remember them telling me, or Kenyatta telling me, I was like, what am I missing? He was like, you're missing working with other men. You're missing helping other people, man. And I could just remember going, what do I fucking have to offer anybody? I'm homeless. I don't know where I'm going when I get out of here. I don't know what's going to happen. And he was like, I don't care, man. Just do it. Do it anyway. You got knowledge because you've been out of these rooms long enough. You know what I mean? You know how to talk some stuff. You know what I mean? And then he cared enough about me to told me to shut up. You know what I mean? He cared enough about me. I remember being in a men's meeting with him, and I had this really good share. And of course, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, so I'm not listening to anybody else in the rooms. And I remember raising my hand in this fire share. And then, he kind of talked kind of loud, and it got quiet in the room right when he said it. And he looked at me and said, why don't you shut the fuck up? You don't know anything about staying sober. And I was like, hurt my feelings, you know what I mean? But he cared enough about me to tell me to shut up and sit down and listen. You know what I mean? And he cared enough about me to hurt my feelings. You know what I mean? And so he did that, man. And I just followed his lead, man. I did whatever he did. He took me everywhere. He'd come and pick me up, bring me to outside meetings, buy me coffee, man, do all those things with me. And, it saved my life, man. And I moved out of there, man. I went into Gateway. I was already making amends, before I got out of there. I can remember I was going to go back into restaurant work. But at first, I started volunteering at a soup kitchen. A guy that I grew up with gave me $5,000 as I walked out of Gateway. That could have went really bad. I didn't know where I was going 2 days before I got out. This is where I'm saying, like, God started to work in my life. I remember getting a call. I didn't know where I was going to go 2 days before I got out of treatment. This guy calls me while I'm in Gateway. That's when you can have cell phones in there. And he said, what are you going to do when you get out of there? And it was a guy I grew up with, and his parents had passed away. They left him a bunch of money, and he said, well, I want to help you get back on your feet. So he sent me $5,000 on the day I walked out of treatment. So I immediately gave it to my dad. I called my sponsor, and he was like, just this could help you, you know what I mean, if you do it the right way. So I gave it to my dad, let him be, in charge of it. I moved out. A buddy of mine who's now no longer with us, who overdosed, was in Stepping Stones at the time. He said, I'm in treatment. Just go stay at my apartment in Riverside. I went over there. I stayed with him. I put on one of his sweatshirts while I was there by myself. Now, this is like, I remember one of the tryingest times I was in there, man. I was like, I was probably 4 months sober. And I remember I put on one of his hoodies to go outside. His parents had a lot of money because I don't know who else goes to treatment with, drugs still at their house. But I remember reaching in his pocket and I found 3 grams by myself, smoking a cigarette, 3 grams of, Delata heroin mix in his pocket, and I'm by myself. And I can remember just going, I found out later that's what it was. I didn't know what it was. I thought it had to be cut or something like that. So I flushed it. And I talked to him. I went and visited him at Stepping Stones, and he was like, did you find anything in my house? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I found a bag or something. He's like, yeah, that was heroin Delata mix. I was like, Jesus Christ. Didn't get high, man. Didn't use. I remember I continued to do the program of action. I got active, man. I started doing a lot of service work. I started volunteering at a soup kitchen downtown at a Catholic church. And then the guy hired me on to bring in like food and stuff during the week. I'd work with him like 3 days a week. There's a guy named Jimmy the Cricket, and he was like would die of service work. I mean, him and his wife just fed homeless people. They were Catholics, so they would take me to Catholic mass. And then so what I did, I wasn't really sure of the whole God idea, but I was open-minded and willing. I didn't shut down. So I would go to Catholic mass with them. I started going to church. I started doing all these things. I'm still not there, man, but I'm still open-minded and willing to any spiritual practice. So, Buddhism, Catholics, Christianity, like all that stuff, like anywhere I can find God, I'm looking for him, man. I'm always trying to enlarge in my spiritual life, man. So I I went in there, and things started changing my life. I lived at that guy's house for a little while. 2 days before he got out, I ended up moving in with a couple other guys in the program. It was a friend of mine named Paul, who was like my spiritual advisor, very mellow guy, but suffered with depression. So we kind of helped each other. I was real hyper still. And I got out, man, and moved in with him, lived with him for about a year. He's still one of my best friends in the world, man. I remember asking him later on, I was like, man, I was really cool. And like my first year of sobriety, we lived together. He was like, dude, you gave me so much anxiety. he's like, but he was like at 2 years sober, and he was kind of going on this, a little bit of a down slump. You know what I mean? He still suffers with depression. And I remember him just saying like, but you got me amped up. You know what I mean? So we kind of helped each other. Got in that, man. I remember being in there, and I was going to go back into restaurant work because Jimmy the Cricket couldn't pay me anymore, and he was kind of just paying me out of his pocket. And I remember going, and I had my resumes on the bed. At this point, I'm praying all the time. I'm in a spiritual program of action, and that's what I'm doing. And I remember hitting my knees and saying, God, I need something else. Can you help me with? I need another line of work. I got a call from a guy at Beaches Recovery, one of my best friends to this day, man, and he said, he's still looking for work. 15 minutes after I asked God to pray to give me something else. And he hired me on as a behavioral tech, and that interview was classic, man. I go in, and they're like, well, why should we hire you, basically. And I'm like, well, I'm like 6 months sober. I'm a chronic relapser. I'm a multiple convicted felon.
Hired.
No. Yeah. They're like, yeah, we're going to give you a shot, dude. They gave me a shot. They hired me as behavioral tech, and I did really, really well, man. I did really well. I ended up moving into like a lead tech position. I ended up moving into like a facilities manager. And then I get hired as like a business development person, man. And that person left that hired me. I ended up being a director there. And now my job is, man, I go to hospitals and I sit bedside with people that are suffering with the same addictions that I have, man. And I got a very different approach than most people that are in this line of work do. I'm very hands-on. I mean, I pick them up from the hospitals myself. I bring that. It's not just a call and run their insurance and see if they can do it. I'm doing whatever I can to help this person get placement because I'm that guy. I'm the guy sitting in the hospital, man. So I got a heart for him. And God just placed me in that position, man, to where I'm in positions to where I'm right in those same positions where I used to be. And it always reminds me, man, I never get too far away from it. And God's kept me in the trenches for years, man. I bring meetings into the same treatment center I do every week. I go into detoxes. I share the message of recovery, man. And I always end up sponsoring the guys that just can't get it. The guys that chronic relapsers like me, man, God always kind of sends those people, man, they gravitate towards me, and they're like, man, your story, like you're the guy because I was the guy that couldn't get it, man. I'm the guy that's in the room. They're going, here he is again, picking up another white chip, man. And I don't ever want to be like that to anyone else because everyone deserves a shot. I don't care, man, how many times you've relapsed, how many times you've gone back out. I'm that guy. I'm almost 7 years sober, man, with no mind-altering chemicals.
Congratulations.
You know what I mean? And so, man, I never thought that was possible, man. And for now, my life, man, is just like, nothing in my life, and I've gone through hard things of sobriety, but nothing is worth picking up for me, man. It just isn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My whole life, there is no just one time. There isn't any of that because once I put any substance in my body, I'm powerless. I don't like when people say that living life on life's terms. I'm not a big fan of that slogan. I live life on spiritual terms. You know what I mean? And I'm okay. You know what I mean? I'm okay with that. I don't have to live life on life's terms, man. I have tapped into something greater than myself. So I'm no longer powerlessness. I'm no longer powerless. I'm not a recovering alcoholic or addict. I'm recovered. You know what I mean? And if I stay doing the things that I'm doing, then I stay recovered. You know what I mean? That's what my book tells me that I read and that I go by. You know what I mean? I'm a recovered alcoholic. I'm not recovering. You know what I mean? I am. If I continue to do these things, does it mean that that I'm stay good forever? If I continue to do these things on a daily basis, then I will stay recovered. And that's just what I believe. I have gotten married in sobriety to a woman that's way out of my league. Beautiful woman, strong. Just helps other women. That's what we do, man. We got people over our house all the time. We're taking people to the steps. We're doing all these things, man. She has 2 young kids that I got in their life, so I became a stepfather. we got married. It was everybody in the program. It was beautiful, man. It was just a real cool thing, man. I ended up becoming a licensed interventionist, man, and I fly all over the world and do interventions, and I do family assessments, and I help the families to heal as well as the person we're intervening on. And I'm good at it, man. I'm good at it, and that's just like God was able to use my worst and my darkest things to end up helping someone else, man. My past became my greatest asset in life. I mean, it does. They can't, you can sit down and talk with a therapist. You can sit down and they can teach me lots of things, man. If you haven't been there, you don't get it, man. I'm not saying I didn't learn a lot from therapists and treatment, because I did. You know what I mean? But how I learned to stay, they can't teach me how to stay sober on a day-to-day basis. You know what I mean? They can't, but a person that's come out from under can teach me, and I just follow their lead, man, and I'm able to do that. And I'll end with this, man. I can tell you things are good in my life. I'm a father, I'm a husband. Me and my dad, every year now, man, we on my birthday, November 26th, man, we get together, we go to a meeting. I give him a medallion. I go to meetings, man, and when I share and talk, man, my friends tell me, they're like, your dad just looks at you and just smiles, man. It's awesome. And that stuff, you can't bottle it up. You can't shoot it. You can't do any of that. Me and my dad just talk all the time about recovery, man. And it's awesome, man. But I always, my mom, wasn't able to, I got sober 1.5 years after my mom passed, and she was never able to see that. But I know she is watching down, man. But it still would be cool to be able to, everyone always says that she sees you and she knows you're sober. And I understand that, but it'd still be good to call her. And so at about 2 years of sobriety, made a second amends. My sponsor had me write a letter to her, but then on 2 years of sobriety, man, I held on to that letter. I never read it. Or, it was just a letter that basically, saying I'm, all the things I did to you, stealing your medications, putting you through the hell that I put you through. And, and it's just an amends letter, how we write out in the 9th step. And so I got on a surfboard and paddled way out in the water, way as far as I could. I put a little note, and I put her ashes in a little waterproof little container, and I paddled way out in the ocean, and just sat there, just me, God, and my mom, man. And I spread her ashes, and I took the little letter out, and I read it, just sitting on a surfboard in the middle of the ocean by myself. And it basically just said, Mom, I'm, of course, made the amends, and the thing I did, and just said, Mom, I'm okay now. I'm all right. I'm sober. I'm like 2 years sober. I'm in a relationship. My life is good. You don't have to worry about me anymore. And it was a beautiful thing, man. And it's cool, man, because it's the same place I go surfing all the time. And I just sit out in the water, and it's just like where I can say, hey, Mom, send me a wave. Love you. I'm okay. So.
Opportunities for those spiritual moments that you'll never get if you're using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Nothing is worth using today, man. And I have a network of men that I can call at any time, man. I got a great sponsor. I sponsor a lot of men. I have a career, I bought a house, got a new car with my tag on it. You know what I mean? It's like all those things, man. All those, all those things are great, man. But bottom line is, man, the thing that I love the most, man, is I wake up every day and I'm okay. I ask God to put people in my life that I can help today. He does. They show up, and I'm there for them, and I'm available. You know what I mean? Me and my sister have a great relationship. I'm an uncle to her kids. I'm a father to my 2 stepkids. And I get opportunities like this, man, to share, my experience and what has happened, man. And it went from people not wanting me around, now people want me around too much.
Even though they're druggies.
Man. They all want me, and they're always calling, asking for help, man. And, I've got a good reputation, and that's why I've done well in my job. It's just because I actually care. You know what I mean? And if I can't find them help with us, I'll find them help somewhere. You know what I mean? I'll get them placed somewhere, and I'll get them help, and then it's kind of up to them, and I do whatever I can to help them through the process, man. And I get to see people recover on a day-to-day basis, man. I get so many calls of guys that are a couple years sober and are like, dude, do you remember when I first called you and I was just like in my lowest pit and you came and got me? And I'm like, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
That is a beautiful thing about working in the recovery field when you get those opportunities.
Yeah, I get to see people get things back, man, and that's the highlight of my life now, man.
Yeah. Well, you have an incredible story, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing. I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot out of it, man.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much, Christopher.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Yes, sir.